Hey, what's up guys? For those of you that don't know me, I have been a Challenger player since set 3, and in this video, I'm going to be going over a headliner tier list for patch 14.1. Now, I actually have already dropped a flex guide for this patch. If you haven't checked it out already, I recommend you check that video out first. It has a lot of useful information and could be very good context for the information in this video. But in this video, I'm basically going to be going over the best headliners you want to be looking out for in the early, mid, and late game. I'm going to be going over stuff like itemization for each headliner, which trait is better for that specific headliner, and the comps you want to angle towards if you're playing around that specific headliner right now. Now, before I jump into these headliners, just some general tips. In the early game, the strategy is still generally the same. You really want to be looking for an S or A tier headliner. So for example, this is like the 1 cost. I have the 2, 3, and 4, and 5 costs down below. But in the early game, the S tier headliners here are the ones that could really scale you until level 8 at stage 4-2. You could generally keep these 3 headliners until stage 4 and then swap to like TF or Viego or whatever. The A tier ones are not as strong as the S tier. These A tier ones, generally you might have to swap it out at level 6 at stage 3-2 because they eventually get outscaled. And the B tier, they're takeable, they're just like extremely situational. Like, so for example, like Tahm Kench is in B tier, but if it's country Tahm Kench, you have like an Urgot, then Tahm Kench is actually pretty good in that spot. You generally take like a B tier one if it fills in like a specific like gap in your team. So if you have like all tank, like Pantheon, Vi 2, and then like you find that Jinx headliner, this Jinx is perfectly okay to take because it could scale you until stage 3 or 4, save you a shitload of HP. But if you have like a weak opener, no summable items, game plan is the same, you just full open until stage 3-2, and you usually play around the reroll comp because you're broke. So I prefer to lean into like Seraphine, Yone, or Riven. They did nerf like the 5 loose streaking strat. You're down like 6 gold at stage 3-2, which is 3 less rolls, but it's still good comparing it to like the other scenario where like you have a weak opener and you like try to play win streak. That's basically like the fastest way to go 8th. But you almost always still swap your headliner at 4-2 for a 4 cost one. This strategy is still the same unless you're playing a reroll comp. One thing, by the time this video has dropped, I am streaming. So if you have any questions, I would love if you drop by my stream or even just say hi. And I also have another YouTube channel where I go over my VODs and explain my thought processes in each game. So if you enjoy that, feel free to check me out as well. And yeah, I'm going to jump straight into the 1 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost, 4 cost, and 5 costs. Okay, so let's first go through all of the 1 cost headliners. Take note that this tier list really only applies to stage 1-2 to 2-3. The reason why is because after stage 2-3, you're going to naturally level to 4, and you'll really want to be looking for a 2 cost headliner instead. But in the S tier, we're going to have Olaf, Taric, and Nami. So Olaf, both the Bruiser and Pentakill are pretty damn good to take. I think if you're playing reroll Olaf, Bruiser is better because you usually want to play into 6 Bruiser towards the mid and late game. And to hit 6 Bruiser, you need to hit Alawi, but if you have the Bruiser headliner, you do not need to hit Alawi, which is why Bruiser is better for reroll Olaf. I think if you're just playing tempo Olaf into like Yone or Riven or Viego, I think Pentakill is actually better in that case because it lets you activate the 3 Pentakill trait way easier just by finding a Kale or a Gnar, and you could easily just play like a second Bruiser, and then that Olaf is usually going to win you most of your fights anyway. Best in slot Olaf is usually BT Titans +1 if you're playing the reroll variants, but usually if you're just playing tempo, items don't matter because you're switching them over to a late game carry anyway. For Taric, S tier as well, Disco Taric is the one you want. One of the strongest tanks in the game early game, and it basically gives you a free pass into TF. And you generally just move all your tank items onto Blitzcrank. I think the Guardian Taric I would only take if you already have like a Disco setup already. And for Nami, Disco Nami is the one you want. Dazzler is not as good because generally you want to play Nami with Bard anyway. And having a Disco Nami lets you activate 3 Disco with only a Taric. You just want to make all of your TF items on your Nami, and then you just move all the items over onto your TF. In the A tier, I would grab one of these if it fills in a gap in your team. I think Yasuo is probably one of the strongest in the A tier. I think Edgelord is the one you want because it lets you get in 3 Edgelord very early on just by finding a random Kale or something. But if you're playing reroll Yasuo, I think the better one to take is going to be True Damage because it lets you activate 6 True Damage at level 8. Itemization doesn't matter if you're just playing tempo, but if you're playing reroll, I think best in slot reroll Yasuo is it's called Edge of Night now. It's Edge of Night, Hodge, and Giant Slayer. And Corki, still pretty decent, but I would only cop the Corki of AD items. Really easy transition into Ezreal. He holds red buff, blue buff IE pretty well. Evelyn is a crowd diver. She actually holds AP items and bruiser items very well. So like I often find myself putting items like Titan's Hodge on her. Her super fan item is Hodge as well. So you're going to have like a pretty good setup for Evelyn into a transition into a Viego, Riven, or whatever, or Yone. And she also holds like AP items as well. So for example, like you get the super fan item Hodge and you get like the Nashers. You slam Nashers, you slam like Gunblade. Shojin's not even that bad on her. Again, you just transition into like a late game board. I think the crowd diver one is better just because like if you have the KDA one, you have to play like a random Katarina. But if you have like the crowd diver one, you just play 3 superfan, 3 KDA really easily. And chances are if you have the KDA one, you have to play like a naked Seraphine or like a naked Kaisa. So like the 5 KDA isn't even as good because you end up playing like a useless like 1-star units. Vi got buffed. I think like Vi is a very good like item holder for like the bruisers, like Yone, Viego. She holds Hodge, Titans, BT, all pretty well. She also holds like the tank items really well. I think Punk and Mosher is actually both pretty good. I'm actually not 100% which one is better, but I think Punk is pretty good because it lets you activate 4 Punk early game, and 4 Punk early game is actually pretty relevant. So 2 more left. It's going to be Lilia. I think Lilia is better than Kennen just because. So Lilia and Kennen are both superfan units. But Lilia also has access to KDA, and I think KDA is like a lot better than true damage in the early game. Superfan units also scale well into level 8 just because if you're playing around like the Karthus Kali board, generally you're keeping the superfan units till level 8. So this is like a unit you're going to be playing for the rest of the game. And Annie is like a decent item holder for AP items. I think the Emo one is a lot better than Spellweaver. Probably would not cop the Spellweaver one at all, to be honest, but you just slam like all your attack speed AP items on her and then you pivot into like Karthus or TF. Okay, so now let's go over the 2 costs. So in the S tier, we're going to have Seraphine, Gnar, Gragas, Kaisa, and Kayle. So for Seraphine, there actually has been a new comp that popped up, which is Seraphine reroll. In this comp, you're just rerolling for Seraphine, and then itemization for her is going to be Shojin Morello +1. It doesn't actually have to be Morello. You put the Morello on someone else. You just go like another AP item or Nashers. It's fine as well. The superfan item for Seraphine is Deathcap. But I think the KDA one is better just because it lets you activate 5 KDA at level 7 because you're playing around the 3 superfan units anyway. So you already have 2 KDA. And then if you get KDA Seraphine, you just play like a random Ari at level 7 and then your traits are basically perfect. But if you have AP items, it's perfectly fine to pick up like the Spellweaver Seraphine just to play tempo. Gnar is also really good. I think the best trait you could go for is the Superfans one. It's really easy to slot in like the 3 other Superfan units, and if you have like the headliner for Superfan, you get 5 Superfan in and you get the Radiant item on Gnar. And then usually if you have like 2 other items on Gnar, he just goes infinites. And it's like a super good transition into pentakill. You move the items over to Viego. Alternatively, if you just find like a random Gnar, it's like he's also really good at holding items for Riven and Yone, which is like the reroll meta right now. I think Gragas is really, really good right now. He's probably the best 2-cost tank in the game right now. I think last patch it used to be Garen, now it's Gragas. And Gragas is especially good right now because he has a very easy transition into Disco TF. So he just holds like the 3 generic tank items. Gragas is also good because one of the augments, Too Big to Fail, is also in meta right now. And Gragas is a bruiser, plays really well into that augment. Kaisa is probably the best traditional 2-cost AD item holder in the game right now. She holds like pure AD items really well, like Deathblade, IE. She's good holder for blue buff, good holder for red buff. Probably the perfect item holder for Corki. Or sorry, not Corki, Ezreal, because she's also like a big shot. Usually playing like 3 KDA with her, or 3 KDA, 3 Superfan, you get the free item for Kaisa, which is Deathblade. But Kaisa is just very, very solid units. Usually you just want to go triple damage on her because she already has so much built-in survivability from her dash. Kayle, I think, recently got buffed. She's really good at holding attack speed and AP items. Super easy transition into Karthus because she's already like a pentakill edgelord unit. You just slam stuff like Gunblade is good, Nashers, Archangels, Shiv, Guinsoo's. Anything like this is fine on her. Your current board playing around Kayle is usually already established for like pentakill. So it's like the easiest pivot into pentakill. In the A tier, we have Twitch first. So Twitch is in the A tier because I think Twitch is... So like if we're playing Twin Terror, Twitch is S tier. Executioner Twitch, by the way. But I think like if you're just playing Twitch as like a tempo unit, he's like not as strong as like the other units, which is why I left him in the A tier. But I think if you're playing Twin Terror variant, the one you really want to go for is Executioner because it lets you activate 4 Executioner. And then you want to go for stuff like GS, Guardbreaker, and Red Buff. But honestly, like because like Executioners is like more of like a tempo comp. You usually just want to slam whatever AD items you have on your Twitch to make sure that when you roll down a 3-2 or 3-5, you want to win. You want to make sure you win the next 5 rounds to get the streak gold. Philios, Heart Seal is the one you want because it lets you activate 5 Heart Seal mid game. Again, usually you only take this if you have like a lot of HP, and then you just go for the Giga Cash Out and try to win out. Bard is, I think both traits are good. They're like kind of situational. Like Jazz is good if you already have like a lot of active traits, but Dazzler is better if you don't have a lot of active traits. But overall, Bard is just a pretty good holder for like TF and Karthus items. Stack whatever AP items you have on him, and then you transition at level 8. I think Garen, he's not as strong as the last patch because 6 Sentinels got nerfed. I think they also like briefly nerfed the Garen as well. I'm not 100% sure, but you just go 3 tank items on him. I think Sentinel is better. You don't want to go for the 8-bit one. You just play into like a 4 Sentinel mid game to save you a bit of HP. Senna is like still a pretty decent like AP or attack speed item holder. TF, usually a pivot into TF for Karthus. And then Katarina, I think Crowd Diver Katarina is decent. She's good at holding like Hodge, Deathcap, JG. Yeah, just standard AP like bruiser-ish items. But generally, you're usually playing around like 3 Superfan with Katarina and Evelyn. But usually, you just slam whatever like items you have on her, and depending on your items, you pivot into like whatever. I think she's like a decent item holder for like Yone, like i.e. Hodge. It's not even that bad on her. All right, so on to the 3 costs. So I think the 3 costs are a lot simpler because like you usually like lock into like a 1-cost headliner, and then you usually natural, like by the time you natural a 3-cost headliner, the 3-cost headliner is usually almost always stronger than your 1-cost headliner board. So like the tier list doesn't really even matter that much for the 3-cost headliners because it's usually like a straight up upgrade from your 1-cost. But if I were to make a tier list, I would just put like the reroll comps in the S tier. Yone, Riven, Vex, all really strong because it gives you direction, and these comps actually win out games. I think Yone and Riven are in the S tier, but Samira and Urgot are not, just because like I feel like Yone and Riven, you only need to like 3-star 1 unit, whereas the Samira and Urgot comp, you need to 3-star like multiple. So which is why I put these 3 units in the S tier as well. I think Vex is in here just because she's good in not only the reroll comp, but she's also good as like a tempo unit as well. But again, S tier, Yone, I think Crowd Diver is the best one you want to go for. Then Edgelord, then Heartsteel. Usually you're playing into reroll Yone. Best in slot is IE Hodge +1. The third item goes Flex. You go Titans, Edge of Night, GS, Deathblade, Triforce, all pretty decent. If you're playing reroll Riven, you want to look for the 8-bit one. It's S tier. Lets you activate 4 8-bit without the Corki, which is basically a dead unit. And it also gives you a win con if you hit 6 8-bit if you get the spat. Best in slot Riven is QSS, GS, and BT. And if you're playing tempo, then like if you're just using Riven as an item holder to play into Viego, then best in slot doesn't even matter. Vex Executioner is the one you want for Twin Terror, but Emo is fine if you're just playing tempo. Best in slot is usually just Morello, 1 mana item like Adaptive, Blue Buff Shojin, and then 1 damage like JG, Deathcap, or Archangels. Everything else in the A tier, it's like I'm not going to go too much into this because it's usually a straight up upgrade, like I said, over the 1 cost. Any tank is pretty good. I would just say like for Samira and Urgot, you probably only cop this if it's like country, and that locks you in. It doesn't lock you into country, but it gives you like some direction to play into country. Urgot is a lot more flexible than Samira to tempo with because he's just a holder of a lot more different items, whereas Samira needs like Last Whisper, IE, and Lulu is like a pretty decent holder for like all your AP items as well. Okay, so let's go into the 4 costs. These play more into like the actual comps you want to play. So in the S tier, honestly, it's like pretty obvious. It's like just TF, Blitzcrank, Viego, and Karthus. So Blitzcrank, you really want Disco Blitz. I think Disco Blitz is really good because it guarantees you a good front line. Disco lets you activate 6 Disco at level 6 for a very cheap like cost because you're playing Nami, Tarek, etc. Best in slot Blitz is just 3 generic tank items. It's going to be Crown Guard, Steadfast, Warmogs. I think because Blitzcrank is a Sentinel, it's preferred that you go stuff like HP and like stuff that scale off the HP because he already gets so much resistance anyway. It's better to just go full HP to multiplicatively scale your stats. For TF, you want to go for Disco as well. Basically, if you hit Disco TF, usually it's guaranteed top 4, and then you just go straight to 9. I think Dazzler is not as good because usually at level 9, you end up playing like Ziggs and Nami anyway, so you're going to end up with like 5 Dazzler. But best in slot TF is usually Morello, Archangels +1. +1 could be stuff like Shojin, stuff like attack speed item like Nashers or Shiv. I think Shiv is like good if you don't hit the Ziggs, but if you hit the Ziggs, you don't need the Shiv anymore because Ziggs is built in like MR Shred. You could also go healing, which is the one I actually prefer because like the problem with TF is like usually it gets chunked down by Akali and Karthus, but he has no way to heal back up. But Gunblade sort of counters like that matchup. For Viego, if you're playing around Viego, he's S tier. You usually want Edgelord. in my opinion, because it lets you activate 3 Edgelord at level 8. I think without Edgelord at level 8, he just dies randomly. But if you have like a spat or something, I think it's better to take Pentakill because it lets you activate 7 Pentakill really easily. And it also gives you a win con for 10 Pentakill at level 9. If you hit like another spat or something. But I think at level 9, I guess like if you hit level 9, I guess like having the Pentakill +1 is okay as well because you get to play around. You get to play around Kale and then you play a 3rd Edgelord. So you can play like Kane or something, or you can play like random Yone. That gives you 3 Edgelord, and then you get dual carry like the Kiana or Zed or something. That's fine as well. Best in slot Viego is going to be, I guess like usually when you're playing Viego, you usually have like Super Fan. So like the item is Titans, and you just put 2 other items on him. So you can distribute like more items to the rest of your carries, like Akali, Karthus. So you go Titans, and then you go like BT, Sterix or something. If you don't have Super Fan if you don't have Super Fan, you just go like 3 like damage items or whatever. Edge of Night is decent on him. And if you like have Even Shroud and you don't have a 3rd item on the Viego, you could actually just put the Even Shroud on the Viego as well. Even Shroud is actually a really good item on Viego. It just shreds like all the armor around all the units he kills. For Karthus, S tier as well. Executioner is better because it lets you play 4 Executioner with Kali and Vex. And best in slot is just your Super Fan item, which is Archangels +2. The other 2 can be 1 damage and 1 mana item. Honestly, itemization for Karthus doesn't matter too much because as long as he has Archangels and Executioner, he's eventually just going to one-shot their backline anyway. In the A tier, we have KDA Akali. I think, we have Akali. I think Executioner is better in my opinion because if you're playing Akali, you're generally playing like the Super Fan trio, which is going to be Lilia and Nico. That means you usually already have 3 KDA. There's not really a point having KDA Akali because you would have to play like a 4th KDA unit to activate 5 KDA. But I would say like best in slot, if you have Spat, it's Pentakill Spat, i.e. Hodge, and you play into the Pentakill board. Otherwise, it's usually like 1 anti-heal item. She's really good at spreading the anti-heal, and you go i.e. Hodge. For Ezreal, I think Ezreal is A tier. I think like if you're playing Ezreal, you have to play Super Fan, or not Super Fan. You have to play Heartsteel level 8 because your win con is usually like getting like a lot of cash outs with Heartsteel, and then you sort of like outvalue all of your opponents with your excess gold and itemization. I think like Heartsteel is better to hit at level 8 because it lets you go for the cash outs, but I think Big Shot has higher cap at level 9 just because like you're not playing like some of these dead like Heartsteel units. But best in slot is going to be red buff, blue buff, and IE. I would say Zed is actually in the A tier as well. He's a great secondary carry to play. Crowd Diver Zed is the one you really want because it lets you activate 4 Crowd Diver with Yone and Kiana. And if you're just solo carrying the Zed, you don't have to play like a shitty second Crowd Diver. But I would say best in slot Zed is going to be GS Hodge +1. I think like there is a comp going around where you dual carry the Ezreal and the Zed. Basically the strat is like your front line is Zac and Set, and then you're playing Ezreal and Yone for 3 Heartsteel, and also gives you Crowd Diver with the Yone and the Zed as well. And usually like just get a lot more items on your comp, and then you just sort of outscale them with your items. The board is actually pretty good because they buffed Zac. Zed is pretty strong, and Ezreal is honestly pretty strong as well. And again, Zac is here because he's just like a pretty good tank. He recently got buffed, and he lives for a long time with 3 tank items. All right, so on to the 5 costs. I would say like the 5 costs, Alawi and Yorick are still really good just because late game, I think frontline is key. Alawi is the best tank in the game. Yorick is the best bruiser in the game. And Ziggs recently got buffed. He is actually a unit now and is probably the best AP carry in the game right now. The traits don't really matter late game because like the odds of you hitting like a headliner at level 9 is like 2%. You can't really be picky with your trait. So usually you really only cop the headliner if it fills in like a gap in your team. So like for example, you're missing a tank, you usually want Alawi or Yorick. Missing an AP carry, you usually just take the Ziggs. You don't really look too much at the trait. In the A tier, we have Lucian. So Lucian is probably the best AD carry in the game right now. I think best in slot Lucian is like 1 anti-heal item, Guardbreaker, Gunblade. But honestly, you don't have the luxury of best in slot because you pretty much already slammed all of your items. Like you shouldn't be playing around like a 5, with the idea of getting a 5 cost headliner towards the late game. So you just put 3 random damage items on him. It's absolutely okay. Sona is in the A tier, but I would say like she has really high cap. Only reason she's in the A tier is because I think she needs like the perfect item setup to get her going. So like I would probably only cop her if you have like Shojin Guinsoo +1. Because that's really how she carries the rest of the team. And she also kind of needs like a secondary damage dealer, in my opinion, like Ziggs or Jhin or like Ezreal, because she's more of like an enabler instead of like a solo carry. I put Kayn in the A tier as well just because I think he's like pretty good. Like He's like one of the only holders late game for like a certain set of items like Hodge, JG, Spark. Also, he uses like Crown Guard really well. I think like Kayn is generally like a pretty decent unit, and he fits really well into like the current late game meta, because the late game meta right now usually play around like a lot of edgelords like reroll Riven, reroll Yone. Actually, that shouldn't even matter, because if you're playing reroll Riven, reroll Yone, you don't want to be looking for a Kayn headliner anyway, because you're looking for because you're not selling your Yone, right? But I think like Kayn is still like a pretty decent unit overall, so I slotted him in the A tier. But I think Qiyana's like not as good anymore, just because like you kind of need to get her early, and then because they nerfed Econ, it's like harder to get to level 9 and find her randomly. And she just straight up got nerfed, and I think Jhin should sort of get shit on by Karthus Akali. I think he takes a little too long to ramp up, and you also need like best in slot Jhin, so like, yeah, not really too good. A lot of times Ezreal is straight up better. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the 5 costs. Alright, so this sums up my Headliner 14.1 tier list. If you guys enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Twitch. I will be streaming by the time this video is posted, so again, I really encourage you guys to drop by and say hi. And the stock is in the comments below, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys next time.